Welcome to the Imagineering Education Podcast. This is Thomas Riddle. Thanks for joining us for conversations held at the crossroads of education and design, with a healthy dose of inspiration from Disney's Imagineers. Each week, we feature pertinent commentary on relevant issues and informative interviews with leaders and practitioners from the fields of education, design, entertainment, and more. It occurred to me recently that throughout the course of this season, I've made several references to two projects, Indy in the Classroom and Star Wars in the Classroom, but never have really explained what those projects are all about. So on this episode, we have a very special guest to help me tell that story. My longtime friend and collaborator on all things related to Star Wars and Indiana Jones, the one and only Wes Dodgens. Wes is a veteran high school history teacher with nearly 20 years of experience in effectively using the power of storytelling to engage students in his classes. And I'm very excited to have him join me to recount our adventures in teaching and learning with these two incredible franchises. So, Wes, welcome to the show.
Oh, thanks, Thomas. I'm really glad and excited to be here with you. Very proud of the work you're doing with your podcast here.
This is really kind of the first thing I've done solo. Let's see what I did there. I've done on my own without Wes when it came to an educational initiative, because Wes and I have been at this this game of teaching together, working together, well, since 2007 or so, I imagine.
Yeah. Just
about that.
Yeah, coming up on 15 years or so almost. Yeah, getting there.
Yeah, for sure. So what I thought we'd do, Wes, is our listeners have heard me make references on and off to Star Wars in the Classroom and Indy in the Classroom. Talked about Indiana Jones a little bit when Adam Bray came on. And then with Star Wars in the Classroom a little bit with when Amy Ratcliffe was on, and also S.T. Bende and Ian Desher. But, you know, our guests who may not know our work may not know what Indy in the Classroom and Star Wars in the Classroom is all about. And so I thought we would I kind of got the cart before the horse, I guess. And so now it's time for us to for those who don't know, kind of tell that story. So we've had some pretty incredible adventures together over the years.
Yeah, no doubt, man. We've gone a lot of places, met a lot of cool people, and had a lot of fun. And the best part, of course, is finding these fun ways to engage our students and get them to pay attention and learn things that otherwise might have just passed them on by. But by kind of reeling them in with the fun of Indiana Jones and Star Wars, you're kind of changing what education looks like for them, which is pretty cool.
Yeah, and Wes has been doing that nearly as long as I have, and only say nearly because I'm a bit older than Wes. This is my 30th year in education, and so Wes is just right up about 10 years behind me. So I had a chance to get a head start on teaching with this stuff. But what's really cool is that Wes and I used to teach together in the same high school, Malden High School. And when Wes first came in as a teacher, Wes, was I a principal then, or was I still in the classroom?
No, I think it was your first year back in the classroom.
Yeah, I'd spent some time.
But I didn't know that at the time.
Yeah, I'd spent some time in the same school as an assistant principal and really missed teaching, so I went back to the classroom. And that's when Wes came in. And, he discovered that I think you saw I had Star Wars stuff in my classroom or something like that.
Yeah, my first, not full year there at Malden, but the first week or two that I was there, they didn't have a classroom set up for me just yet. So I had to be the floater, so to speak. If you're in education, you know that term. And so it's a term you don't want to hear. But anyway, yeah, I had to float in your room for a couple of days. And, I was blown away by all the Star Wars stuff you had in your room. And I thought, wow, here's a guy that's really embracing it. And I thought that was awesome. Because I figured, in education, especially as a young teacher, you'd have to kind of suppress that because that wouldn't be cool. But I thought, okay, well, maybe I can let the world know that I like Star Wars. It's not a big deal.
Yeah, at that time I was teaching mythology with Star Wars. And it's funny, I do not remember this. Wes has a better memory than I do, but I think he tells the story that I kind of blew him off or something like that when he approached me about wanting to learn how to do this or something. I don't remember. What was that?
What happened was it was near the end of the year, and I was actually supposed to be moving classrooms to over there where you guys were in the building. And I think I was getting old American history books from you or something like that. And we were talking about Star Wars and teaching with it. And you had mentioned that that summer you were thinking about going up to Boston to go to that
Oh yeah,
science exhibit.
right.
And so I was like, oh, I love Boston. I love Star Wars. Hey, we ought to do that. And you were like, yeah, okay, we'll do it. And so I emailed you over the summer, and I'm like, so hey, are we still going to go to Boston? What's up? And you never wrote me back.
All right, listen, I will accept that story. I have absolutely no recollection of that. I do remember, the science, the science of imagination, I think is what that exhibit was. The Boston Museum of Science. It was really cool.
Yeah. Well, I didn't get to see it, and I blame you for that. So.
Well, I never went either. I would feel really bad if I actually ended up going and didn't take you. But we have been.
Well, I kind of spent the summer thinking that's what happened. I thought you were like, this new guy's kind of weird and crazy. We don't want him going to Boston with us. So.
Oh man. So you thought I ghosted you, but yeah, we ended up taking several road trips together, and hopefully have more in the future. So fast forward though, when Wes began teaching at Malden, and I was as teaching as well, and so I ended up giving Wes the curriculum I had created on teaching mythology with Star Wars, and we talked a little bit about that. We actually got to spend some time together to get to know each other over a weekend that we went to a workshop for our school through the ASCD. And Wes came over to my house he's going to ride down with me, and I had a bunch of Star Wars stuff displayed in my office. And I knew.
Can I just interrupt and say it was more than a bunch?
Yeah, my wife would say that too. I had a good bit of stuff out in the office. But I knew Wes knew his Star Wars stuff when he mentioned one particular character. Who was that?
Well, I was looking in your numerous little showcases, display cases there, and I saw Blue Snaggletooth, and I thought, this guy's got some good stuff here. And so I mentioned it to Thomas, and I remember he just kind of slowly turned in his desk chair and looked at me and he said, you said, you know about Blue Snaggletooth? And that was it, man. That was it. I should have used that before the Boston thing had I known.
Yeah, had you done that, maybe I wouldn't have blown you off, right? And ghosted you.
That's right.
Yeah, but yeah, it was kind of funny. We bonded over Blue Snaggletooth, but we had a good time, and that's really that weekend where we got to really talking about how the importance of engaging students with things that interest them, and then particularly we started talking a lot about how to teach with Star Wars, and it moved beyond what we were doing with Star Wars and mythology, or what I was doing at the time. And that's when I ended up giving everything over to Wes that I had, and we started collaborating on that. But then I found out that Wes is an Indiana Jones fan too, and particularly Young Indy. So tell us about Young Indy, Wes, and how that affected you as a kid.
Yeah, so I grew up obviously watching Star Wars and Indiana Jones and all those kind of things, and of course in the early 1990s I was real excited as I guess I was in junior high school at that time, and I was really excited when Young Indiana Jones started coming on TV, and it was just really captivating, and it introduced me to a lot of historical people and topics and things that I really never heard of before, particularly with World War One. I don't even know if I knew what World War One was at that time, and so I was just really captivated by Indy in the trenches and him traveling all around into the different theaters of war, and of course Remy, being his best buddy and all that kind of stuff. And that's actually what kind of got me hooked on history and introduced me to my love of history. And then it just so happens that exact same year I was in 8th grade, actually. Now it's all coming back together, and I had a really great history teacher that year who was just really inspirational. He was a great storyteller, and I just thought, hey, that's what I want to do. And so here I am. I'm a history teacher, and to this day I still love World War One. It's my favorite historical topic, and it's all because of how it was introduced to me in the Young Indiana Jones series.
Yeah, and it's funny because you said you were in middle school when that series came out, and I was teaching 8th graders with Young Indy as it was coming out. So I guess I could have been your teacher, young buck. I would record the episodes, and then when I could fit them into our curriculum in my history class, I would do so, and really enjoyed that series, and saw, like yourself, how kids were really engaged with learning history through through the adventures of young Indiana Jones. And of course, that was George Lucas's intention for that series anyway, was to for it to be used by teachers in teaching history, world history in particular. And I think that, it's just an honor that Wes and I have been able to have some success in helping, we hope, in some regard, making that vision of George's come true, because we've been able to, I hope, we've heard that we've impacted a lot of classrooms over the years with providing resources for teaching with the Young Indy series. And that kind of takes us to when we heard about Young Indy coming to DVD. I mean, it came on VHS for a number of years. I mean, it took a long time to come out on VHS. And then fast forward to 2007, I had changed my career path to where I left the classroom and became the social studies coordinator for our school district. And that's about the time that the news was coming out that Young Indy was going to make its way onto DVD and then be supported by about 94 documentaries that related to all of Young Indy's adventures. And when we heard about that, we were ecstatic, because this could be finally an amazing tool to help teachers go deeper with teaching with this very popular character. And so in my role, I was going to be doing teacher trainings and had this vision that I would train all of our teachers in our school district how to teach with Young Indy, or the ones that wanted to, all the social studies teachers. And so I wrote a letter to Howard Rothman, who was head of licensing for Lucasfilm, and told him, what I taught with Young Indy for many years, and found it very valuable. And now I was going to be teaching teachers how to teach with this Young Indy series and learn about the documentaries. And if there's any way I could get a preview of them, I'd love to do so. And if I could help in any way, let me know. And then I sent a couple of lesson plans I'd used in the classroom. And I remember ending the letter by saying, we'll keep you informed of our success. I also forgot. I told them that we were going to do a museum exhibition at our local science center, at Roper Mountain Science Center, and that we would create this exhibit where kids would study the real history of this fictional character and create museum-style exhibits based on different events that Indy participated in, or things that he witnessed, like the Harlem Renaissance, or World War I, World War II, or going on safari with Teddy Roosevelt, learning about the importance of conservation. And so we were going to do this expansive year-long deep dive into researching Indy in these different schools voluntarily, teachers and students who wanted to, creating these exhibits. And we were going to call that Walking Through Time with Indiana Jones. And then we were going to have it displayed 2 weeks before the Crystal Skull came out. And so we had all our timing right. As they were rolling out the DVD series, we also were going to be using those DVDs in the classroom and engaging these kids to do some real authentic research to create a project that could be enjoyed by the community. And so that's when I ended with, we'll keep you informed with our success, thinking that we may not get permission to do so. And lo and behold, to my surprise, heard back from Tom Warner, who was the head of marketing at the time for Lucasfilm, and said, hey, Howard sent me the letter. We'd love to talk. And that blew me away. I called Wes and said, all right, man. Because we had not really formalized a website or anything. We had just been teaching more or less on and off with Indy, doing this small scale. And then I said, okay, you're a webmaster. You're an amazing teacher. What can we do to put something together and create a website to support this? And that's where Adventures in Learning with Indiana Jones was born out of. So you want to take it from there, Wes?
Yeah, I just remember that day when, I was driving home from work, I think, because I was driving back into my hometown, and you called me, and I answered the phone, and you were like, "You're not going to believe, phone conversation I just had, or and all that. And it was just like, I don't know, it got really real very quickly. And it was really phenomenal that, things were kind of moving that quickly, that there was that kind of interest in what we were doing. Because I think we just wanted to get a preview of those documentaries, and next thing we know, we're talking to Lucasfilm about some other cool things.
Yeah, so, and that was awesome, because we were really just wanting to see the documentaries and just to say, hey, how can we help? And then they said, what do you guys think? And it moved rapidly from there. So we created, Wes created IndyInTheClassroom.com, which was our first website. And it's a 15-year-old website now that still has a ton of terrific content on it, and would highly recommend that you visit that website if you're listening, you never have. But what we started to do is put our lesson plans and other resources for learning with Young Indy and just the Indy franchise in general on that website. At the same time, we had the chance to get the advanced cut discs of the documentaries before they were, literally they were pressed and then sent to us before they were, as they were still putting the DVD series together. So Wes's class got to be the first in the nation to see the incredible work produced by David Schneider and Sharon Wood, who were the two producers for the Young Indy documentary series, who became friends of ours. His students got to see their work first, and they were blown away by it, weren't they?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, they're blown away by it every year, because I still use a good number of those documentaries in class. But yeah, it's just cool. It's like we were having our own little Hollywood documentary premiere right there in my classroom. And I wish I could remember which one we saw or which one we specifically showed that day.
I remember. It was the Harlem Hellfighters. Because I'll never forget. Yeah, it was the Harlem Hellfighters, and Colin Powell is interviewed as part of that. And I remember vividly, there was a young girl. These were sophomores, I guess, or your world history class. Mm-hmm. And there was a young African-American girl sitting on the front row watching this thing. And at the end of it, this incredible story about these volunteers, these African-American volunteers who fought so valiantly in the Great War. I remember her looking up and saying, Mr. Riddle, why have I never heard of these men before? This is amazing. And, she was like, I want to learn more about them and what they did. And I remember that opened a discussion up in your classroom about the importance of telling diverse stories in history. Sure. And I do recall that I wrote a letter to David Schneider and letting him know that the response was fantastic, and telling that little girl's story and some other things that she had said about, how passionate she was about wanting to learn more. And I remember David emailing us back and saying that he'd read that letter to his staff, and there were lots of tears, because I remember him telling us he didn't know if many people would ever see those documentaries or how widely they'd be viewed. Yeah. And so, that was amazing. And so that gave us an opportunity to really have a great time working on creating this museum style exhibit called Walking Through Time with Indiana Jones. And on that Adventures in Learning with Indiana Jones website, we have some of those images and a description of that day there. If you just click on the tab, you'll see it. But it was a lot of fun. It broke the record for a single day attendance at our local science center. And we, as Wes said, we got to collaborate with some really cool people at Lucasfilm over the course of that year. And that was a dream come true for us.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so Crystal Skull came and went, and it did what it did. Yeah. I still like the film. I think Wes and I debate about that sometimes.
But yeah, it's Indiana Jones. It was fun.
Right.
I think, they should have promoted Young Indy a lot more instead of that movie, but My opinion.
Right. Well, with Young Indy, if you're not familiar with the series, it's available on three volumes, and they released them a few months apart from each other. Actually, it was over the course of that school year. I think it was like September or August, something like that, if I recall, where Volume 1 was released, and those are the early years when Indy's like 9 years old. And then about the middle of the school year, around winter, we got Volume 2, which is the war years, where that's the episodes and the documentaries that Wes and I are really kind of most passionate about, having to do with World War One. And then in the spring, they released the Volume 3, which had to do with the post-war years when Indy comes back and is going to college and meets Al Capone and Elliot Ness and Sidney Bechet, and there's some really cool 1920s history in those. But those films we highly recommend, especially if you're a history teacher, even if you're not. I mean, if you're an ELA teacher, science teacher, I mean, there's documentaries. There's a documentary about Goddard as the father of rocketry, or what we call modern rocketry now. There's a documentary on ecology. What are some of your favorites, Wes, that come to mind?
Well, of course, my favorite documentaries have to do with World War One, but kind of following in what you were just talking about. I mean, there's documentaries on there that have to do with fine arts. There's a good one on Norman Rockwell. There's a good one on, I think, Cubism, so Picasso and on all those kind of things. There's great ones on like philosophy, Eastern medicine. One of my favorites actually is the one on Krishnamurti, and that's a great example of how, before Young Indy, I had no idea who that was, or I've never even heard of Krishnamurti. Never even heard of was it the Theological Society?
Theosophy, the Theosophy Society. Yeah.
Yeah, Theosophy. That's it. And that just broadens your horizon, to be exposed to stuff like that. And so if you're an educator, you should just buy them to watch the documentaries yourself, and learn a lot about early 20th century history. It's amazing.
Right. It's really as a curriculum consultant, someone who's worked and as a veteran history teacher, that's some of the best content, I would argue, Wes, that I've seen for education. That's kind of what people would say outside the box or whatever. I mean, it's engaging with pop culture, but the documentaries are phenomenal.
Yeah, they're paced really well, and they do have a lot of credible people in them, like you mentioned, Colin Powell. So they have a lot of great experts in those particular areas, talking about their particular content or whatever that topic for that documentary is. But they're also timed well. So each one's usually about 25 minutes. Some of them are a little bit longer than that, but typically they're not more than 30 minutes. So they're great for any classroom, whether it's a block, an hour and a half or 50 minutes. You'll have plenty of time to watch it, plenty of time to discuss afterwards, which is great.
Yeah. Yeah, we just can't say enough about it. And I'll tell you right now, if you want to get a taste of what type of quality documentary storytelling we're talking about, as we're recording this, it's November 11th, 2020, and today's Veterans Day. So I'd be remiss if I didn't thank all the veterans who may be listening. Thank you for your service. And, of course, we would not have a nation. The world would be different without the veterans of the United States military throughout our history, going back to the beginning. So thank you for your service. But today, in particular, Lucasfilm really began to promote an initiative to tell the story of the Tuskegee Airmen, commonly known as the Red Tails. And to that end, they've created a website, or a page rather, on the lucasfilm.com website for educators that features information about the documentary that was created to support this movie, Red Tails, that was made by Lucasfilm. And this documentary is called Double Victory, and produced by a friend of ours, Sharon Wood, one of the producers of those Young Indy series, or Young Indy documentaries that we were telling you about. But it is a fantastic story told by the men themselves. And it's available for free on Lucasfilm's YouTube channel and also on the lucasfilm.com website. It'll be there for the foreseeable future. We're very excited about that. There also is an educator's guide that was created to go along with the documentary that has fantastic activities for students in grades 6 through 12. And for the month of November, if I'm not mistaken, Wes, I think it is this month, Red Tails is streaming for free also at Lucasfilm's channel. So you can check that out as well.
Yeah, and if I can just jump in and mention too that you're talking about Sharon Wood. One of my favorite documentaries in the Young Indy series, or in the documentaries, is her documentary Lines in the Sand, which is about obviously World War I in the Middle East, but it really focuses on how the Middle East was changed by World War I, and how a lot of the political issues and things like that go on in the Middle East even to this day go back to a lot of the turmoil that was created out of World War I. And that's just a really tremendous documentary. And she was responsible for that one as well.
That is probably one of the best documentaries I've ever seen, or best synopsis of the conflict that we see in the present day Middle East.
Yeah, and it's really, I think one of the reasons that makes it so captivating is because I think for most people, or many people, I shouldn't say most, is that we just don't know a lot about, number one, World War I in the Middle East, and we don't know a lot about where all these conflicts and all these issues in the Middle East originated, and so it's a really, really important, I think, eye-opening documentary for everybody to see. And I know my students, it's a little bit more, because it's so different, they don't know much about the Middle East, and whatnot before we watch that. So it's a little bit more cerebral than some of the other documentaries, just because they don't have a lot of the background knowledge. But they really enjoy that one, and they tend to have more questions after that one than any of the other documentaries that I show them throughout the year. They're really curious to learn more about that situation once we've watched that one. It's a really, really good one.
And speaking of Sharon, we will be forever indebted to her for extending an invitation to us to visit her at Skywalker Ranch, which was probably one of the highlights of the time that Wes and I have worked together. I mean, we've become great friends. We've had a lot of laughs. Our families have got to do a lot of things together. Matter of fact, that weekend, our families, Wes and his wife went, and then my wife and myself and our 3 sons, who were much younger at the time, we all got to go to San Francisco for the weekend. And so we've had a lot of good adventures, but that one, I think, was one of the best because we got to go to Skywalker Ranch. So what's your memories of that, Wes?
Oh man, I got so many great memories from that. I mean, from the category of being like a super nerd, that's like the most awesome thing you can possibly do. It'd be like, getting to go to Hogwarts for a Harry Potter fan or something like that. We got to go to Skywalker Ranch, and that was as cool as you could possibly imagine it being. Just, I don't know. It's hard to explain. It's like, I hate to describe it this way, but it's like going to a holy place or something like that. It's really cool. You're doing something special when you're there, because it's something that not a lot of people get to do. There's a story that Ronald Reagan asked to go visit Skywalker Ranch, and George Lucas told him no. So we got to do something that even the president didn't get to do.
Yeah, it was a fun day, and Sharon gave us the grand tour of Skywalker Sound and the main house, and we got to really explore all over, and it was really special. And I think the thing that was most surprising was running into George Lucas by surprise in his kitchen or the kitchen at the main house of all places.
Yeah, that's a funny story. I love that story.
Yeah.
You want me to tell it?
Yeah, you can.
Ben, who's your oldest son, he at the time, and he may still be, I don't know, he was very much into organic food. That was kind of a new thing back then. This is in 2010, by the way. And so Ben, they grow a lot of their own food at Skywalker Ranch, apparently. And so it's very organic. It's as organic as it can get. And so Ben had an opportunity, thanks to Sharon, to meet the chef. And so we were all taken back to the kitchen of Skywalker Ranch. And, I'm selfishly thinking, okay, we're at Skywalker Ranch and we're talking to a chef. We need to be doing something cooler than this. As Luke would say, we're wasting our time.
We were getting cappuccinos too now. Come on. They had an amazing cappuccino machine.
And the lunch was delicious. It was great. But we're standing there.
Right.
Right. And we're all piled into this relatively small kitchen. And I'm by the door. My wife's behind me. She's really close to the door. And then Thomas is kind of stuck over in the corner on the other side of the door.
It's one of those swinging doors.
Yeah, it's a swinging door. And so this one little waiter man keeps coming in and out, getting food. And so we're constantly having to kind of shift and get out of the way when he opens the door. And I don't know, the fourth or fifth time this happens, the door swings open again. And so by this point, we've become accustomed to kind of maneuvering and turning around and getting out of the way. And this fourth or fifth time the door opens, I turn and look and move, and there's George Lucas standing there in his flannel aura. Okay. And you would grab the door because you were behind it.
I couldn't
see him. And you didn't want to get Yeah. And so
Wes
George
had this
Lucas,
shocked look on his face.
Yeah. He's like, what are you people doing in my kitchen? He didn't say anything. He just looked at us funny. And then he realized the door was magically opening by itself. And that was Thomas kind of pulling the door open so he didn't get squished. So George Lucas leaned over behind the door and looked right at Thomas. And then he turned around and walked away. And I remember Thomas and I, we just looked at each other and our eyes got, super huge. And all of a sudden we were like, well, we're not standing in here anymore listening to the chef talk. We got to go out there and see what George Lucas is doing. And so there was this fast exodus out of the kitchen to go stare at him while he ate his lunch.
No, remember what he was doing? He was picking out his drink. It was a Diet Dr. Pepper or something like that. I forget. But
Diet Coke.
Diet Coke. There you go. But it was funny. What was really interesting though is that Sharon had told us that there was a possibility that we could run into George because he was on site with a team of writers working on the live action Star Wars TV show. Now, remember, this was 2010 when those rumors were circulating around, and George was there working with that staff of writers, and they were all out there. They'd taken a break for lunch and come down to sit out in the dining room area, and they were all sitting around. And here's the thing, though, I did not know Dave Filoni at the time. I don't even know if Dave was there, but I recognize Dave now. But now I would think I would have recognized some of the writers around that table. But at the time, I didn't know who they were. And, of course, at the time, we were also just enamored with the fact that we were standing beside George Lucas picking out drinks,
Right.
And
yeah, and as you were saying that I actually was thinking about that. I'm like, that was 10 years ago. And how many of those people sitting at that table would we possibly recognize today? And what have they done since then?
Right.
And if I remember right, and I hope I'm not taking this story from you, but I believe we were told that it was supposed to be a live action show that had something to do with bounty hunters.
Yeah, I think so.
And I'm not going to claim that that's what has become the Mandalorian, because that could be completely Jon Favreau for all we know. But
right.
I mean, it's possible that Disney got some stuff from that and spun it into the Mandalorian.
Yeah, I have no idea what became of those that work or anything. I'm sure there are plenty of Star Wars fans out there who know more about that than you or I do, but that was our brush with that. I remember thinking that was going to be really cool, but how could they pull Star Wars off on television on a budget like that? But that was Young Indy. That was, one thing people may not realize is that the Young Indy series was also the proving ground for technology that George would later use in The Phantom Menace. And he was really taking advantage of some new capabilities for CGI to create these massive battle scenes and things like this. In the Young Indy series, And of course, Rick McCallum was the producer of the Young Indy series and also produced the prequel series with George as well. So they that was the proving ground for some of the technology that would later be used for Phantom Menace. So and of course now we've seen definitely how you can take Star Wars and turn it into a weekly television show, because Mandalorian is quite amazing. So, before we end, Wes, we've talked a lot about kind of the Young Indy series and stuff, but tell us what you think as a classroom teacher. What are some valuable uses of that series, or why, if there was someone that was asking you, why would I want to teach with Young Indiana Jones? What would you say?
Well, I would tell them that, one of the biggest challenges we have as teachers is, finding connections to our students and giving them a reason to care about what it is that we're trying to teach them. And I think back to my experience as an 8th grader, or, maybe even a 7th grader, when I was watching Young Indy, and I think about the impact that it had on me and how it literally changed my life. And so I would tell, that teacher that, these kids deserve to see that particular content presented in a different way. They deserve to see it presented maybe in a dramatic way. And it can have that effect on them to make them curious to where they understand why that particular historical figure, why that particular topic, that particular event has more meaning than their teacher just standing up there and talking about it, if that makes sense. And so I think Young Indy gives students an emotional connection to something that maybe happened, in the distant past. And it makes it real for them, and it makes them want to learn more, makes them curious, and it makes them realize that, history isn't just a bunch of facts. It's not something that we just have to rattle off and list a bunch of things that we randomly know. That, things that happened 100 years ago or 500 years ago, it all leads us to where we are today, and it has meaning. And I see that a lot with my students when I use Young Indy. It allows them to go to Africa with Young Indy and see what the fighting what the fighting was like there, or go to the Middle East with Young Indy, or be there when the Bolshevik Revolution was happening,
or learn about humanitarianism and compassion from Albert Schweitzer,
right.
in Africa,
in the Congo.
Exactly.
Yeah. So I think it's a very powerful tool for students and for teachers to use, for sure.
Yeah, and just so we can clarify, the timeline of these stories run roughly from 1908, when Indy's 9 years old, to about, I think it was the early 20s, and I can't remember exactly, 1920, yeah. 1920, I think 1920. But yeah, it's the early 20th century, and Lucas also really wanted to focus on that period because he's said on numerous occasions that he believes, as many historians do, that those first 2 decades of the 20th century really set the tone for everything that happened afterwards for the rest of the century. And as Wes mentioned, that's often glossed over in our history textbooks, that time period, and it's so pivotal in many ways. And so Lucas touches on a lot of those aspects, even with like with Freud and Jung and Adler at the conference in Vienna for the first conference there for the study of psychology. Indy's there with his dad, and you get to meet those 3 great minds around the table, talking to Indy about love and what is love. So it's a great segue, kind of an introduction into piquing the interest of kids to go off and explore further. So can't say enough about that series. It really kicked off our adventures of working together around Indy in the classroom, and that led to Star Wars in the Classroom, which we will talk about in the next episode, because we've run out of time for today, but we'd love for you to come back and listen to the next episode, where we'll talk to you a little bit about the importance of, or the power of teaching with Star Wars, how we found it effective. And so we hope you'll tune in for that one. So Wes, meanwhile, I appreciate you coming on today and look forward to you joining us again next week.
All right, man. Yeah, I had a great time. I look forward to it as well. Thanks for having me.
So thanks for joining us for today's show. If you'd like to learn more about our work, including our workshops, webinars, speaking engagements, and more, visit our website at imagineeringedu.com. You can also follow us on Twitter and Instagram at ImagineeringEd and Facebook at Imagineering Education. We hope you'll also subscribe to this podcast on iTunes, Spotify, Google Podcasts, or anywhere else you like to listen to podcasts. And when you do, don't forget to leave us a review and rate us, please. It helps other people find us. So until next time, remember, there's a great, big, beautiful tomorrow, just a dream away.